Hello students, welcome to the chemistry sessions once again. So I hope you all are revising what we are actually continuing within the chemistry in everyday life chapter. So what we have discussed so far is related to most prominently the drugs, the drug action, how do actually the drug inhibit the action of enzyme and the substrate and receptors and the substrate. So how is actually the mechanism is? So let us just revise that. In the case of enzyme and drug interaction, so we have done two kinds of work which drug display. One is the competitive behavior, that is the competitive behaving as a competitive inhibitor, and the non-competitive. So in competitive, it serves as a competition between itself and the substrate. So instead of the substrate, it goes itself and goes onto the active site of the enzyme. So that is how it gets fixed onto that. And what else do we have? In the case of non-competitive, so at that moment what it does is it just inhibits the process. It is not now mimicking but just inhibiting the process. How? It is now getting attached onto some different kind of a site, not the active site but allosteric site. So what it does is it changes the shape of the active site and then making the substrate confused, due to which the substrate now don't get attached with the active site of the enzyme. So that is how the work goes on, and that is how the drug serves as a inhibitor. And what about in the case of drug and receptor? So in that case, what is happening? The chemical messenger is the main thing which is playing the role over here, and the chemical messenger is transferring the information to the receptor and finally to the cell. So basically what drug does is, again first of all mimicking, it tries to act like a chemical messenger but it is not actually. Therefore actually inhibiting that process, preventing that process. And what else? It can inhibit the process of meeting of chemical messenger with the receptor. So that is how it is also acting as in competitive inhibitor. So basically what is the positive side of this kind of an interaction of drug with the receptor? So the positive side is it is trying to mimic about the type of chemical messenger. So what happens whenever naturally there is very less production of chemical messengers within our body, which are a very important part, because actually due to the chemical messengers, the messages, the signals are transferred from one place to the another within our body. So due to the mimic action of the drug, it actually can replace and can work like a chemical messenger in order to fulfill the deficiency of that. So I hope that is very well clear to you, all the processes. And what we have discussed in the last class was about the chemical messengers, what kind of chemical messengers we can have. So in that case we have discussed about the hormones, that is the first. And what else? We have got the neurotransmitters. So we have got the neurotransmitters. So over here under the case of hormones, I had discussed about the adrenaline and I had told you about what adrenaline rush is. So that is what we have discussed is adrenaline. Adrenaline. It is actually secreted by the adrenaline gland. So adrenal gland. So basically it actually develops a kind of strength into our body. It gives us power to deal with some exaggerated situation. What kind of a situation? Some situation, something related to excitement, or maybe a stress situation, or maybe some kind of anger situation. So such kind of situations, emotional or mental or physical, it gives us emotional, mental as well as the physical strength to deal with that situation. So basically this very hormone is released at that time moment which we are experiencing such conditions. And what about the neurotransmitters? Neurotransmitters are actually serving as a messenger between the nerve endings. It carries the signals from the nerves onto the receptors. So that is how the neurotransmitters work. And over here I have got dopamine. I told you about dopamine. And what else? We have got serotonin. So basically, for a fact of information, I would like to tell you that serotonin or dopamine, they can also be serving as the hormones. So although they are included under the category of neurotransmitters, but sometimes there may be overlapping with the type of hormones as well. They are serving as the function for hormones as well as the neurotransmitters. So that is why, as I asked you in the last class, that what is serotonin, why it is known as the happy hormone. I am calling it as a hormone because it may be, its work may be overlapping with that of the hormone sometimes. So basically it is known as the happy hormone. Why? Because it actually stimulates our body. It stimulates our body with happiness. It generates happiness whenever we see food, whenever we have our favorite food. What happens? We actually act like cheerful. We are happy at that moment. So basically that is because of the release of this hormone, this very hormone that is known as the serotonin. It is also known as the happy hormone. That is why always whenever we are depressed and at that moment if we eat something, we feel good. Why? Because the release of this hormone which stimulates our brain, which actually makes us feel happy. So that is why it's known as the happy hormone. It gives us a sense of a pleasure. And what about the dopamine? So dopamine is also, again, its work is overlapping with that of a hormone. It can be called as a hormone as well. So dopamine is actually giving euphoria. What is euphoria? So the people who actually have drugs, what kind of feeling is generated at that time? A sense of excitement maybe? So a sense of euphoria, what we call it as. So dopamine is actually released at that moment whenever we have such kind of an excitement within our bodies. Within our brain actually gets stimulated, our nerves get stimulated, we feel excited, we feel happy. All our emotions are exaggerated at that time. So that is dopamine, and it is actually slightly different from serotonin. It actually results in happiness most prominently, but this may or may not result in happiness. So this is also sometimes preferred to be as a hormone. What is actually the structure for serotonin? Let us just discuss. So it is something like this. So the structures of dopamine, we have already done this before, dopamine as well as for the adrenaline. And it is slightly similar, but we have got another ring over here attached. So that is how, that is basically the dopamine. So this is, serotonin. Can be called as a hormone, but actually functions as a proper neurotransmitter. These are nothing but the chemical messengers that we have discussed. So these were the chemical messengers. And also what I told you about the neurotransmitters is, it gets attached for a short time onto the receptor, and once it gets attached, it transfers the signal and immediately it leaves the vicinity, it leaves the receptor and then gets degraded. So that is how the neurotransmitters work. I hope that is very well clear to you. Let's move on to the another class of compounds. So here we would like to discuss the class of drugs that we can have. What kind of drugs are possibly there and what is their action, what is their therapeutic action? That means having a soothing experience, or I can say they are serving as the remedy. So different classes of drugs. So on the basis of their action, how they are acting as the therapy agent. So their therapeutic action on basis of therapeutic action. So that is what we are going to discuss under the different classes of drugs. And for that I would like to introduce one very important drug and very commonly used is antacids. So we have got number 1 as antacids. What are antacids? Those drugs which are serving as antacids. Ant means anti, anti to those, and anti to what? Anti to acids. What kind of acids I am talking about? The acids, whenever we eat food, we have got a digestion process within our body. So for that digestion process, what is released within our body? What is released in our stomach is enzymes, various kind of enzymes, as well as the HCl, that is, yes, the hydrochloric acid. Acid is released in order to make the food digest. So basically pepsin is released and HCl and many more enzymes are released. So what is actually happening? Why we are needing antacids? So in some of the conditions you may be having that some kind of burps whenever you eat food, you might be having stomach pain. So what kind of a condition is that? That condition may be due to the production of more and more acid, that is the hydrochloric. So you must be thinking that hydrochloric acid is a very harsh acid. It makes our skin vigorously burned whenever we put the pure acid on our skin. So since HCl is very, very toxic, it is actually burning the area, it is actually burning the skin. So how does it actually takes part within the stomach, within the digestion process? So that is actually the beauty of chemistry, actually the beauty of chemicals, what do we have in our bodies. So basically the HCl, the hydrochloric acid that is released within our body is in slightly diluted condition. It may not affect the walls of the stomach so much, but if there is overproduction of this acid, it can lead to so many problems generated within our stomach. We cannot even be able to have food properly even. So basically what happens is, due to overproduction of acids, acid, what kind of acid I am talking about? The hydrochloric specifically. So hydrochloric acid, so basically due to the overproduction of acid within the stomach, what happens is it leads to irritation within our stomach. They may be leading to burps, so many burps, and so there may be stomach irritation, or even may result in pain. You might be having stomach ache sometimes. So that may be the result of overproduction of this acid, that is the hydrochloric acid within our stomachs. So it may be resulting in irritation, in pain, or in severe cases it may be leading to a condition known as ulcers. So it may be leading to ulcers as well. It is a severe condition. Actually the lining of our stomach gets disrupted and it results into a condition known as ulcer that is developed within our stomach. So the only treatment for treating the ulcers is just to get operated and remove that portion. So that is the only severe condition and that is the only treatment which is possible over here. So due to the overproduction, you may be thinking that so much of diseases can actually start getting developed within our body. So basically it results in ulcers. The treatment is, if I talk about the initial treatment, initial treatment, that is having some kind of drugs. So here we would like to discuss the drugs over here having a therapeutic action. So first is the initial treatment, that is we can take up medicines. So drugs are nothing but the medicines, or what we can have the final treatment. So treatment in severe cases, that is surgery to remove the ulcers. So I hope you are actually getting it very well. So that is the only conditions which are happening due to the overproduction, just the overproduction of acid within our stomach, and the lining of the stomach starts getting degrade. So here what is happening? What kind of initial treatment we can have? So you must be thinking that if there is a lot of acid within our stomach, we can neutralize it. Yes, definitely. That is the actual method of having a particular drug. So for that case we need what? We need a base. So initially in the earlier times what we used to have was some kind of medicines having weak bases in it. So initially what we used to take was weak bases were taken. What kind of weak bases? Maybe sodium hydrogen carbonate. What is that? NaHCO3. Or maybe some kind of metal hydroxides. What kind of metal hydroxides? Maybe aluminium hydroxide could have been taken, or magnesium hydroxide. So here metal hydroxides were also taken, like aluminium hydroxide, or I may write the formula. So these were the kind of medicines that were taken in the earlier times. Now this definitely relieved the pain. This definitely actually lessened the amount of acid which has been produced in the stomach. Actually it neutralized the reaction. What was the action here? Their action was neutralization of excess of acid. That was the kind of action which was served by these weak bases that we used to take. But there was a drawback for these bases. What kind of a drawback was that? So the drawback was, so I'll just write it over here. Drawback of weak bases. When we used to take weak bases in order to neutralize the acid, what had happened was the weak bases would have resulted in alkaline nature within our stomach. So some of the bases were actually making the stomach alkaline. If I would have consumed a lot of weak base, because the quantity was not approximately known at that time, that how much amount of weak base is actually required in order to neutralize the amount of acid, which we don't know. How much is the amount of acid which has been produced within our stomach? So we used to take it randomly. So what had happened was the stomach may have resulted in an alkaline nature, or alkaline liquid was developed within our stomach. So the stomach was filled with alkaline fluids, thereby making what? Now the reaction has been made alkaline. The stomach would now try to secrete more and more hydrochloric acid in order to actually reverse that reaction. That is nothing but the Lee-Chatelain principle that you have got. So, I hope you are trying to recall what Lee-Chatelain principle is. Whenever within an equilibrium reaction, if we try to actually affect it somehow, let me just have a small amount of acid, let us just have this kind of a reaction, and if I try to add up, or I can say, let us just say that this is the HCl that has been produced within our stomach. So, if I try to neutralize this HCl, what will happen? There will be a slight deficiency of HCl to the right of the reaction. That means according to the Lee-Chatelain principle, what will be happening? The reaction will shift more and more towards the forward direction, that therefore, there will be more and more production of HCl within our stomach. So, what was happening was, the stomach was actually now filled with alkaline liquid. Alkaline, it had got alkaline in nature. So, in order to reverse the alkalinity, more and more acid was produced, more and more acid was produced in stomach, leading to what? Ultimately, stomach irritation, stomach pain and ulcers. So, here leading to stomach irritation, pain and ultimately and ulcers. So, actually consuming the weak base was an option. Sometimes we actually have, whenever we feel that there is so much of acid being produced within our stomach, we are getting so much of burps. So, at that moment we sometimes consume soda. So, what does the soda does? It is a weak base and it tries to neutralize the reaction. So, that is how actually it works. So, these are nothing but what we are taking as antacids. It is reducing the effect of acid by neutralizing. So, these were the weak bases that we used to take earlier. Now, what are the weak bases, or I can say what are the actual antacids which have been taken these days? So, the antacids that we take these days is latest, or I can say which the antacid that was produced, which served as a revolutionary product. So, that antacid that was produced was cimetidine, as well as one more was there. So, cimetidine is also known as the Tegamet. Some of you might have heard about it, and next was Zantac. So, these were the two antacids were produced at that time. Zantac is also known as the Ranitidine. So, these were the two antacids produced at that time, and they had served a very well functioning. So, what is the function? These are nothing but the drugs. So, basically what happens within our stomach, that is the question. Within our stomach, before the secretion of HCl, before the secretion of hydrochloric acid, what happens? There are certain chemicals known as histamines. So, now the question is, what are histamines? So, basically you must have observed that some of you might be having an allergy with the dust. You start immediately coughing, you start immediately sneezing, or you might be having an allergy with the pollens. Some of the people might be having allergies with some of the medicines. They may develop certain side effects, maybe rashes, maybe inflammation or anything. So basically what are histamines? These are actually the chemicals which are released within our body, and they actually result in some kind of allergies developed. That is an action mechanism of the body against any foreign particle. So in the case of any foreign particle, what happens is it starts releasing histamines. These are the histamines, and then immediate action is, immediate reaction of the body is, you start coughing, you start sneezing. So that is how body is trying to protect you from the foreign substances, by releasing the histamines. And what is the another work of histamine is, it actually stimulates. So if you try to correlate with the process of allergy, what is happening in the body? Actually the release of histamines is stimulating the process of cough, stimulating the process of sneezing, stimulating the process of inflammation or rashes within your skin. So actually what histamine is doing? It is actually provoking the body from inside in order to release certain chemicals, or in order to have different kinds of functions. I will be dealing with a proper function of histamine in the later section. So here, if I talk about the stomach, in the stomach what histamines do is, histamines result in, or I can say histamines play a role in stimulating the glands, stimulating the stomach lining, or I can say the receptors present on this, on the stomach lining, receptors to produce, or I can say to secrete what? To secrete pepsin, that is an enzyme which is used for the digestion process, and HCl. So basically histamine is actually playing a role in stimulating the receptors, then the receptors again receive the message, then they get to know that you need to digest the food, and that is the case when the glands start secreting pepsin and HCl. Here I have written this as the hydrochloric acid. So that is what functioning of histamine is. Now what do these drugs do? These drugs actually inhibit that process. What do is, they do not make the histamines pass on the information to the receptors to make the pepsin and HCl release. So that is how the drugs are inhibiting the action of histamines. So the drugs inhibit the action of histamines, thereby decreasing the production of what? The chemicals that are pepsin and HCl, decreasing the production of acid in stomach. So these kind of antacids are actually not neutralizing and not making the solution alkaline, but what they are doing is they are inhibiting the secretion process. They are itself involved within the secretion process, within that transfer of the information from histamines to the receptors, and it is actually blocking that pathway. So in order to block that pathway, what it does is, after the blockage, less amount of HCl will be produced within the stomach, and thereby serving as antacid, thereby reducing the stomach irritation or pain and even avoiding the ulcers. So I hope that is very well clear to you. Let us just now discuss what are the structures for cimetidine, and this is cimetidine M, and ranitidine. So first of all, just note this down, then I will be taking up the structures. So now let us take up the structures for cimetidine and ranitidine. So for that you need to have an idea what actually the histamine is. Since the drug needs to be actually inhibiting the action of histamine and the receptor, so it needs to have some kind of mimic nature of the histamine in order to actually inhibit that process. So here first, what is the structure for histamine I am drawing? So histamines looks something like this. So that is how the histamine is. So this is histamine, and now a similar kind of a structure will be in cimetidine and ranitidine. So cimetidine is somewhat similar to histamine. It is so that is how we are going to make it. And what do I have over here? A methyl attached. So that is what cimetidine is. This is the basic structure, somewhat similar to our histamine. That means it may be mimicking the process of histamine as well in order to disrupt. So what it actually does is prevent histamine receptor action. Not action but interaction. What else do I have got? I have got the ranitidine. So in ranitidine I have got a structure something like this. This very Me means methyl. So I have got two methyls over here, and what else? A similar kind of structure. You just need to have NO2 over here, NHCH3. So that is how you are going to make the ranitidine. This is ranitidine structure, also known as most commonly or popularly Zantac, and this is Tegamet. So I hope these structures are very well clear to you. You need to remember the structures as well. That is very, very important. Now, what are the latest kind of drugs which are actually used these days? So you do not need to actually go into the details of the structure, but I am just specifying the names. So those are, I am talking about the latest antacids that we use these days. These are Omeprazole and Lansoprazole. So these are also some of the antacids that we most commonly use these days. So I hope you are clear with the idea of antacids, how do they work. So they also sort of help in the neutralization of acid. So basically they are helping in the neutralization as well as inhibiting the process of histamine and receptor. So both the kind of work they play. So these are about omeprazole as well as the lansoprazole. Now let's move on to the another class which we have already taken up an idea for, that is histamines. So histamines, there is in some of the bodies, in some of the people, there is release of high amount of histamines. So due to that they suffer so many problems. So let us just discuss those problems. So here I am dealing with the class of antihistamines. What are antihistamines? So histamine is first of all is known as vasodilator. So you must be finding this word in your books. It is, or I can say the histamine I am talking about is a vasodilator. So what is vasodilator? Vaso means vessels, dilator means dilating something. So basically this is about the blood vessels that I am talking about. So basically what histamine does, whenever there is the release of histamine in our body, it actually dilates the blood vessels. That means whenever you have got, if you have tried watering your plants with a pipe with a continuous flow of water within it. So what is happening? If you put your finger on that nozzle just like this, so what will happen? There will be a high pressure of water from that. So it is the similar case within our bodies as well. Whenever our blood vessels contract, there will be high pressure of what? The blood naturally. And whenever the vessels get dilated, that means opposite of contraction is dilation. So what will happen? The diameter of the blood vessel will increase. So dilation is diameter of vessel increases, thereby reducing the flow of blood, reducing the blood pressure. So it reduces blood pressure, or I can say the blood flow. So basically that is what histamines does. They are vasodilators, they dilate our blood vessels. As well as what it does is it contracts the muscles within our bronchi. What is the bronchi? I am talking about the lungs. All the kinds of tubes, all the kinds of pipes which are present over here within our lungs. So I am talking about that. Bronchi is nothing but related to lungs. So here it contracts the smooth muscles in bronchi. That is the prime function of histamines. So it actually contracts the muscles, and what will happen? Resulting in congestion. Resulting in chest congestion, so much of cough, so much of problems, and in severe cases it could result in asthma. So it could result in breathing problems, conditions like asthma. So that is what histamines are doing within our bodies. They are actually contracting the muscles within our bronchi and then leading to so much of cough. That is what is known as allergy. In a layman terms, we say it as allergy, that I have got allergy from the dust particles, I have got allergy from the cat fur. So these are the kind of allergies which are resulted due to the formation of a lot of quantity of histamines, due to the release of histamines in our body. So to avoid that, to avoid these conditions, we need what? We need certain drugs, we need certain chemicals which are known as antihistamines. So the answer to this question, that what are antihistamines, what kind of drugs here we can use. So a very common example for that is we take up a cough syrup that is known as Benadryl, or we also take some kind of medicines like Cetirizine. So these are nothing but the antihistamines. You need to find out something about Benadryl as well as the Cetirizine, which we use commonly during the cough. So the answer to that I'll be discussing in the next session, along with the structures of these medicines as well. So till then, just keep on revising and have a very good day.